great heart, refreshing souls are set apart. Come to the well, receive his life, living water, endless life.
Welcome to Well and Grace. I'm Regina Bartlett, your host, and I'm thrilled you've joined me today for this episode titled Hannah's Prayer, Finding Refuge in God's Faithfulness, where we explore the powerful, enduring story of Hannah, a woman whose faith and resilience led her to experience God's promises in a way that changed her life and the life of her people. Together, we'll reflect on the journey of finding divine peace, even when life feels overwhelming. So settle in with me for a little while as we dive into Hannah's inspiring story from the book of 1 Samuel. To start, let's set the scene for Hannah's story. We find her in the Old Testament during a time when a woman's worth was often tied to her ability to have children. Hannah was one of two wives of a man named Elkanah. Now, Elkanah's other wife, Peninnah, had children, but Hannah did not. And this was a deep source of sorrow and shame for her. Not only did she carry this sadness, but Peninnah also made things worse by taunting and provoking her. Imagine the weight of that, the sadness of unfulfilled longing combined with a constant reminder of what she didn't have. The Bible describes Hannah's sorrow as anguish. She was in deep pain. For anyone who's experienced seasons of longing or deep disappointment, Hannah's story will resonate deeply with you. But in her pain, Hannah made a powerful choice. She turned to God with her deepest heartache. One of the most profound moments of Hannah's story is her prayer. Picture this scene with me. Hannah's at the temple, pouring out her soul to God, crying. In 1 Samuel 1, 10, and 11, the Bible reads, "In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, 'Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life.'" Friends, this was not a casual prayer. This was a kind of prayer born from desperation and trust. In her words, we see a woman who believes in God's power and his ability to intervene, even if she doesn't understand why she's been waiting for so long. And yet, she still surrenders, saying she will give her son to the Lord if her prayer is answered. Let's take a moment to reflect here. What do you do with your pain? Do you try to handle it alone? Or do you bring it to God? Hannah teaches us that God can handle the raw, unfiltered prayers. He can handle our heartache, our sorrow, and our longing. When we come to him, we're never turned away. This also reminds me of one of my friends. Back in the early 2000s, she was also going through her own journey of longing for a child. Like Hannah, she wrestled with questions and moments of despair as she faced years of infertility. Each month brought its own wave of hope, followed by disappointment. But she held on to her faith, choosing daily to bring her heart and desires before God. Also, like Hannah, it wasn't just one heartfelt prayer. It was a season of surrender, marked by countless prayers, tears, and moments when she'd lay her heart bare before the Lord, asking him to give her peace in the waiting. Despite the continued silence, she found herself experiencing a profound closeness to God, a nearness that assured her that she was loved and known, even without clear answers. Eventually, through much prayer and deep reflection, she and her husband made the courageous decision to pursue adoption. They felt God was leading them to parenthood in a way they hadn't initially expected. After bringing their adopted child home, their hearts were so full, and they felt certain that God's plan for them was unfolding beautifully, though not in the way they originally imagined. Then, in a twist that surprised them both, she found herself expecting her own child not long after they completed their adoption. God had blessed them, but not only with the beautiful child they adopted, but also with a biological child, fulfilling their longing in a way that went beyond their wildest hopes. Looking back, she told me that the years of prayers and waiting, even the moments of despair, had deepened her faith and shaped her into the mother she is today. She says that in each step of the journey, God was refining her, teaching her to trust that His ways are higher than ours. Her story also reminds me that sometimes God's answer isn't simply a yes or a no. Sometimes it's an invitation to a journey, a path that transforms us and leads us to unexpected blessings. Sometimes we lay down our deepest desires, trusting in God's goodness, and He meets us in ways that go beyond our expectations. Let's return to Hannah at the temple. As Hannah's praying, the priest Eli sees her and at first assumes she's drunk because her lips are moving but no sound is coming out. But Hannah explains that she's pouring out her soul before the Lord. Realizing his mistake, Eli responds with compassion. He blesses her, saying in 1 Samuel 1:17, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." This blessing gives Hannah peace. Her circumstances haven't changed, but her heart has. The Bible says that she left with her face no longer downcast. And in time, God does answer her prayer. She conceives and gives birth to a son, Samuel, whose life and leadership will have a profound impact on Israel. What a beautiful picture of trusting God's timing. Hannah didn't know when or how her prayer would be answered, but she trusted that God heard her. This kind of faith can be so hard to practice. Isn't it easier to trust God's goodness when we see immediate answers? But what about when we're still waiting? Now, here's where Hannah's story takes an even deeper turn. True to her promise, once Samuel is weaned, she brings him back to the temple and dedicates him to the Lord. This child she prayed so fervently for, the answer to her deepest desire. She surrenders him fully to God. She doesn't hold on tightly or cling to her own desires. She lets go, trusting that God's plans for Samuel are good. Hannah's faith was not just in receiving what she wanted, but in trusting God's purpose beyond her understanding. She let Samuel serve in the temple, and he went on to become a great prophet, shaping the future of Israel in incredible ways. This part of Hannah's story can be challenging for us today. How do we surrender what matters most to us into God's hands? We live in a world that feels faster and busier than ever, filled with messages telling us to take control, to hold tightly to what we value, and to pursue our own desires relentlessly. Society often places a high value on self-achievement, wealth, and instant gratification, emphasizing that success is something that we must chase after and secure for ourselves. In our culture, there's a strong focus on personal autonomy, on designing our own lives, setting our own paths, and making things happen in our own timing. Social media constantly shows us curated glimpses into others' lives, making it easy to feel pressure to achieve and attain quickly, whether in careers, relationships, or personal goals. The idea of surrendering these things to God and waiting for His timing can feel counterintuitive, even risky. But here's where Hannah's story stands in such stark contrast to these cultural messages. Hannah shows us that the true peace she received doesn't come from getting what she wants when she wanted it, or from gripping tightly to her plans and desires. Instead, it came from trusting that God's plan is good and that His timing is perfect. Hear me when I say this. Surrender isn't about giving up. It's about giving over. It's about letting go of the need to control every detail and trusting that God, who sees the whole picture, knows what's best for us. In today's world, surrender might mean choosing patience over immediate results, resting in God's promise instead of striving for external validation, or allowing our goals to align with His will rather than solely our own desires. It means believing that there is a peace that surpasses understanding and a peace that doesn't depend on our circumstances or accomplishments, but comes from knowing that we are deeply loved and cared for by our Creator. Now, this doesn't mean it's easy. Just like Hannah and my friend and me, we will all have seasons of struggle where surrender almost seems impossible. But in those moments, especially in those moments, we can look to these examples and remember that God is faithful. When we give Him our burdens, our plans, and our fears, He holds them tenderly, working in ways we may not see Him immediately, which will bring about the perfect purpose in our lives, His perfect purpose for us. Hannah's story encourages us to pause and let go of the pressure of having it all right now and to find security not in the things we accumulate or achieve, but in the one who loves us. True peace, like Hannah found, isn't something we can create by our own efforts. It's a gift we receive when we lay down our striving and trust God's good, loving hand. The Apostle Peter reminds us of this in 1 Peter 5:7, where he writes, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you." God invites us to bring our anxieties, our fears, and our hopes to Him, knowing that He cares for us deeply. The story of Hannah is not just a story of answered prayer. It's a story of truly finding refuge in God's faithfulness. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but when we bring our burdens to God, we find strength, peace, and hope that can only come from Him. And life can be messy and overwhelming. In those moments when we feel like we're carrying the weight of the world, isn't it comforting to know that we can cry out to God and He truly hears us? For many of us Christian women, this is our lifeline. It gives us the strength and hope to keep going, to take a deep breath, and to walk through our unique journeys with a little more faith and resilience. The Bible is packed with stories of God responding to His people, listening to the heart cries of those who cry out to Him. Think about it. God is so attuned to us, so loving, that He invites us into a relationship that's built on trust, closeness, and a whole lot of grace. As women, we juggle roles as caregivers, nurturers, leaders, and friends. And while there's beauty in every role, the truth is, sometimes it's a lot. The weight of it all can feel like too much. But even in those heavy moments, God is right there. He's not distant or indifferent. He's ready and waiting to listen. Our cries to God don't all look the same. They can come from deep sadness, a longing for change, gratitude, or even pure praise. I think of Hannah, who in her heartbreak over not having children, poured out her soul to God. She didn't hold back. Her story reminds us that God not only hears us, but understands every part of our pain and joy. Hannah's prayers weren't pretty or polished. They were raw, real, and honest. And through her unrelenting faith, God blessed her. Her life became a testament to His faithfulness. And let's be real, there are times in life when words just don't come. Maybe you're too tired, too heartbroken, or too overwhelmed to string together a beautifully perfect prayer. Psalm 56:8 reads, "God collects every tear we cry." It's a beautiful image. Our tears aren't lost or forgotten. Each one matters to Him. They tell the story of our journey, and God is right there, sharing in our struggles and our hopes. But let's also remember God's answers, don't always match up with our plans or timing. His responses come from a wisdom and love that we can't always see. Waiting can be tough, but in that space, he calls us to patience and trust. Look at Esther. Her story is a reminder that we are placed in our circumstances for such a time as this. Just like her, when we cry out, God may already be setting things in motion behind the scenes. We're not meant to go through this life alone. As women of faith, we have the chance to lift each other up, to share our own stories of God showing up for us in unexpected ways. Our cries can be the encouragement another woman needs. In our sharing, our struggles, and our victories, we create a sisterhood, a community that's there to support and strengthen each other, just like the early church, rooted in shared prayers and faith. Above all, let's hold on to the promise that God's ear is always open to us. He's our refuge, our rock, our steady support. There is nothing too small or too big for Him to care about. So whether you're in a season of joy or heartbreak, remember, God hears you. Every cry, every whisper, every unspoken word is a part of His bigger plan for your life. So let's lean into this truth, trust in His faithfulness, and rest in the promise that we are heard, seen, and loved by our Creator. I want to encourage you today, whatever is heavy on your heart, whatever you're longing for, take it to God. Lay it before Him, not with a spirit of resignation, but with the faith that He cares for you. Maybe your answer won't come in the way you expect, or maybe it won't come immediately. And honestly, it may not come at all. But know that God is with you in the waiting. And what He has planned for you is far greater than what you could plan for yourself. Thank you for joining me on Well and Grace today. I pray that Hannah's story has brought you encouragement and peace, knowing that God sees your heart, your struggles, and your prayers. And just as He was faithful to Hannah, He's faithful to you. Until next time, may you be blessed, and may your heart find rest in the refuge of God's faithfulness. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Well and Grace. My name is Regina Bartlett. God bless, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Well and grace for every heart, refreshing souls are set apart. Come to the well, receive His life, living water, endless life.